We're talking about drugs. We're talking about neurotransmitters in your body and how they work and why they work. Of course, the neurotransmitters, another name for neurotransmitter is ligand. So we're going to talk about ligands today. Don't get confused. When I say ligand, I actually mean a neurotransmitter. Okay, it's working. Neurotransmitters work on just select receptor sites that contain a receptor for that select neurotransmitter. It's a lock and key system. A receptor only allows a select chemical structure to connect to it, and of course it is the lock, and the ligand is the key. Most neurotransmitters work on more than one receptor. For example, acetylcholine works on not only memory and muscle activity, but it also works as an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the vagal nerve area, and it controls your heart and your digestive tract. So it slows it down. So of course you had your interesting problem yesterday on Monday. If we could slow down your intestinal tract, potentially that would slow down what's going on. Have you tried Gatorade?
Yeah, I've been drinking Gatorade.
It didn't work.
Water.
Okay, that's it. That's the trick. The neurotransmitters in the body are known as endogenous ligands. Endogenous means internal. It's inside your body, so an endogenous ligand would be a neurotransmitter like serotonin or dopamine or acetylcholine. Man-made ligands are called exogenous because they're outside the body, exogenous. So these are exogenous ligands. They work because they either act as a neurotransmitter and excite or inhibit the neuron, or they block the action of the transmitter and keep it from affecting the neuron. So you've got endogenous ligands that are natural, that are in your system, and you've got exogenous that are the pharmaceuticals that we are taking. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Some of those chemicals that we take into our body. Some drug molecules bind to the receptor molecule for a long time, while others only for a short time. If you take a pill and it's sometimes they'll say it works for 8 hours, sometimes they'll say it works for 12 hours. Why is that? Well, sometimes we have fast-acting drugs that we put into our system, and sometimes there's slow-acting drugs that we put into our system. A drug with a high affinity for a receptor will stay with the receptor longer, so less is needed to be effective. And of course, this is the problem. This is a problem with opiates. How much do you take in order to affect your system? And the answer is everybody's different. Unfortunately, everybody's different. So one person can take a lot of opiates without much effect, and another individual can take a small amount, and of course it will overdose them. So you have to be really careful with opiates. A drug with a low affinity for the receptor will require higher concentrations of the drug to be effective. And that's the situation that I'm in with opiates, because opiates don't work very well on me. Opiates have a very low affinity for my system, my biochemical system. So it's really hard to treat me with opiates or opioids. They don't know how much to give me. If the first time they tried to knock me out for surgery, they gave me a bolus and they started cutting on me, and I was still awake, so they had to hit me again. Eventually they gave me enough opiates to kill somebody, or to knock out a horse, because it just doesn't work on me. It's just the way it works. I know, it's kind of sad. Yeah, so they've got a normal dosage of morphine. That's what you guys used to carry around in your med packs. I'm sure you had some morphine in there. I hope you did.
No, we had this quick clock.
Oh, okay.
But
oh, yeah. Okay.
They took it off because people were getting
blood clots in their veins?
No, quick clot was like if you had like a wound, let's say I
Yeah.
got shot,
Right,
and you pour it on there.
right.
You know, it looks like salt, but you pour it on there.
Yeah.
For some reason, people are getting infections from it, so we don't have it.
Oh, okay.
That's why they trained us in CLS.
Sure.
So-
Well, that's better than bleeding out, I would think. You can treat the infection later, but, yeah. Yeah. If both high and low affinity drug is present, then the drug with the high affinity will interfere with the low affinity drug and make it not work. And this is one of the reasons why we have to be really careful what we give people, because sometimes the drugs will interfere with one another. Agonists do the same job as the transmitter, and antagonists block the job of the transmitter. Some drugs bind with the receptor and make the receptor do the opposite of what they were intended to do. They inhibit or to excite, or excite to inhibit. These drugs are called inverse agonists. They do the opposite of what the drug is supposed to do. Some drugs bind to the receptor in a place that does not bind the transmitter. When the transmitter binds to the receptor, the drug does not allow the transmitter to activate the neuron. Since the drug does not bind in the transmitter receptor site, it is called a non-competitive antagonist. So it stops the function of the transmitter, but it doesn't bind to the receptor site. And so it doesn't compete with the transmitter for that receptor site. Sometimes we put a drug in somebody, you put a drug in somebody's system, and it blocks the receptor site. But these bind to another receptor site, and they make that receptor site non-functional. And so it's a non-competitive antagonist. Drugs that act in a similar manner but activate the neuron are known as non-competitive agonists. So it doesn't attach to the receptor site, but it still activates that receptor site. So it's non-competitive. So the neurotransmitter can actually bind to the receptor site, but there's already a drug there that's doing that job. And as confusing as that is. The drug Respirine acts as a sedative and as a antihypertensive. It inhibits the storage of catecholamine transmitters, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine in the vesicles, and that's how it works. It blocks that area. Colchicine, an anti-inflammatory and painkiller used on people that are suffering from gout, work because it blocks the maintenance of the microtubules and the axonal transport. So it doesn't allow the neuron to get the same nutrients. And since it does that, gout is a disease, actually it's a condition. It's where the individual accumulates uric acid. They can't process uric acid, and since they can't process it, it crystallizes in their joints. And so, it makes it it's very, very painful. It's one of the more excruciating problems that you can potentially have. It's kind of like kidney stones, except it's in your large joints. Your big toe joint is fairly open, so it gets in the big toe joint, and it gets in your knee. Because I know it's horrible. I started having gout when I was 18 and running track. I drank too much milk is my problem. So I can't take in purines. I can't process purines. So I can't eat fish, I can't drink beer, I can't drink any alcoholic beverages because they have purines in them. And my body doesn't process purines very well. So I can't eat fish, I can't eat any seafoods at all.
Could you take like fish oil?
No.
Stuff like that, no?
No.
Gee,
I know, I was taking a supplement for my knees. I've got joint problems just like everybody else does. And I found out that it had shark cartilage in it. And since it had shark cartilage, I was starting to get gout. I was starting to have problems with my gout. And once I stopped, it was, took care of the whole problem. I can eat a tuna fish sandwich and my toe swells up. because I
You're
can't.
like allergic to it?
I'm sorry?
You're like allergic to it?
Yeah, I guess, well, it's got the purines in it, I guess that's what I'm allergic to, it's not like I break out, it's just that my foot swells up. I have gout, and so there's some things I can't do. Some foods I can't eat. So colchicine is an anti-inflammatory painkiller, and it blocks the maintenance of the neurons. And since it blocks the maintenance of the neurons, you don't have the same pain that you had before, and you don't, of course, it controls the inflammation that takes place. See, that's the biggest problem, is the fact that everything swells up. Your foot swells up, your knee swells up, and it's excruciatingly painful. You can't move your joints. If you watch an old movie, usually they don't even talk about gout these days, but in the old days they used to talk about gout all the time. Gout was caused by people that were really sensitive to alcohol or fish. So if you were very, very wealthy, you got to eat all the meat that you wanted, and you drank a lot of wine. Well, wine, of course, has purines in it, and so if you were sensitive to this, you developed gout. So gout was thought to be a disease of the very wealthy, because they were the only ones that could afford wine on a daily basis and fish, eating meat anytime they wanted. So poor people didn't get gout, but wealthy people who drank too much wine or ate too much fish would have all these problems. So it used to be thought of as a disease of the wealthy. Caffeine competes with the inhibitor adenosine, thus preventing the inhibitory effect, and that's why you get excited. That's why people drink coffee. They drink coffee to get the caffeine into coffee, and then of course the caffeine blocks the adenosine, and since the adenosine is an inhibitor, slows you down, and it's not slowing you down now. The adenosine isn't able to slow you down, so now you're all excited, kind of like amphetamines. Amphetamines work in a similar manner, but with adrenaline. Calcium channel blockers, verapamil for high blood pressure blocks the calcium channel and thus won't allow the activation of the neuron to release the synaptic vesicles. And this slows everything down, lowers your blood pressure. So it won't allow you to get excited.
Or is that the name of a medication, verapamil?
Verapamil?
Yeah. Or is that?
It's a blood pressure medication. But you can there's a lot of different reasons for people having high blood pressure. So if you have the type where you need to block the calcium channels, then you'll take verapamil. That's one type of
They gave me Precision.
Okay.
But they didn't give it to me for blood pressure.
What they give it
to me
to?
for flashbacks.
For what?
Flashbacks.
Okay. Oh.
I guess that they.
Anxiety, okay. So they're giving it to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not-
Did it work?
Yeah. Except for when I got up real quick.
Okay.
First time I took it, I fell on the ground.
Oh.
Because it's originally a blood pressure medicine.
Yeah, it's a blood pressure medicine, so it
Well, I
lowers
guess
your blood pressure.
It helps with the flashbacks and stuff.
Sure.
Like the nightmares.
Right.
So,
And it worked.
yeah.
Are you still taking it?
No.
Okay. Do you still have flashbacks?
Yeah. But it's not as bad.
Okay. Oh, I see what they were doing. Okay, so they're going to medicate you so that you could get over the extreme situation of having flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And once you got over that, the initial flashbacks, then they took you off the medication because you could have flashbacks now without having an extreme
Yeah,
reaction.
then they put me on that, and they put me on I don't know how to say it, busuproin, B-U-S-I.
Okay, that's an antidepressant.
Yeah, they put me on that, and then they had me on an SSRI.
All right, that's an antidepressant.
And then they had me on that, and they had me on Seroquel.
Right, so.
All on during active duty.
Oh, no, this is while you're on active duty? You're
Yeah.
taking that kind of medication?
I was taking, I think, 8 medications at once.
But they didn't send you back to combat?
No, they just put me, I was a paper pusher.
Right.
But I have to tell them I couldn't even function.
Well, I can imagine, my goodness gracious, they were anesthetizing
It was
you.
like this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So that, when I finally got my upgrade, because you know, at the big boards, they usually have a doctor,
Right,
you know. It's usually like a 05 or above.
right.
And they said, well, unanimously, you know, I got up to honorable. They're like, we don't know how you're functioning,
Right, exactly.
but yeah, we're changing it.
Yeah,
So I got honorable with distinction.
right.
So I don't know what the heck they were doing.
Wow.
The problem is that with bases, they switch out doctors so many times.
Oh, sure.
That the doctors don't talk to the people that are coming in, so
Right.
they just go off what they know.
Exactly.
They don't look at the file.
Right.
So,
Jeez, my goodness gracious. Ah, oh, the military. Okay. Amphetamines are calcium channel blockers that inhibit the inhibitory neurons that control the release of the catecholamines, especially adrenaline, making an individual feel excited and full of energy. Since we are normally controlling our adrenaline level, our epinephrine level, if we take amphetamines, what it does, it blocks the drug that inhibits the adrenaline. So you have more adrenaline in your system. So that's why you're so excited. The problem is, of course, you can't have that much adrenaline in your system for an extended length of time, or it starts killing the neurons. And that's what happens to people when they're on speed, when they're on amphetamines. If they stay on it too long, it will start killing off their neurons.
oh yeah.
So now we got a really serious problem.
Tweakers.
These are speed freaks, yeah, and so they're, I mean, literally, naturally, these neurons don't die for an extended length of time. But here they are, they're accelerating the process, they're staying excited for an extended length of time, and those neurons are dying. And since they're dying when they are at a young age, they start looking older and older and older. We see it with meth heads, we see it with speed freaks. These people are just accelerating their lives, and they will die young, because as far as their body is concerned,
That's why they look like real old.
that's exactly,
Face.
right.
I mean, I know that stuff. I mean, I don't know. I've never done it, but I'm sure it eats up away your teeth.
Well, what happens
It's
is...
calcium, right?
Exactly. And when they're high, they don't worry about brushing their teeth or taking care of themselves. They get dry mouth, which affects their teeth. They get all kinds of interesting cavities. Yeah, it takes away the calcium. Yeah, so it's quite a mess.
They don't eat, so that's what they get all
Yeah, exactly.
sucked up, man.
Exactly.
Jeez.
I know, it's stupid. Black widow venom causes the over-release of acetylcholine, and eventually, of course, the individual goes into seizures. Black widow venom, who was I talking? Oh, Marius was talking about, yeah, the infamous MD. Marius was talking about black widows. He said he found a black widow in his house, and now he's all spooked that one's going to crawl up and bite him and kill him sometime.
Which is more dangerous, brown recluse or black widow?
Brown recluse is more dangerous.
Because they actually embed them in your skin. don't
Right.
They just eat you from.
Well, they lay
inside
eggs
out.
in the skin, yeah. Which is always fun. Cocaine and amphetamines inhibit reuptake mechanisms prolonging synaptic activity. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors prolong the synaptic activity of serotonin, which in turn combats depression. This is also how it decreases the sex drive. Unfortunately, serotonin is what controls your sex drive in your brain. Testosterone, of course, gives you your sex drive, but it is tempered by serotonin. So the more serotonin you have in your system, the lower your sex drive, kind of. So the question is, well, that's not really a question. If you're depressed, and there's not a, I mean, you can treat it, If you treat it, a lot of times the sex drive goes away. This happens especially with males, but it can also happen with females, of course. So if we give you a superficial amount of serotonin, it's going to lower your sex drive. Alcohol increases the number of receptors for the inhibitory transmitter GABA. Antipsychotic drugs block dopamine receptor sites, keeping you from being psychotic because you have too many dopamine receptor sites, and that's what makes you act psychotic. Curare, of course, blocks nicotinic acetylcholine receptor sites, and eventually you go into seizures and die. Actually, it makes you paralyzed because it's blocking the sites. Physostigmine is a drug that's given to, we used to call it Cognex. Anyway, physostigmine is a drug given to Alzheimer's patients to increase their memory. It works because it inhibits acetylcholinesterase. Acetylcholinesterase, of course, breaks down acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft. Because it blocks acetylcholinesterase, you have less acetylcholinesterase to block the acetylcholine. Since there's more acetylcholine in your synaptic cleft, you are more likely to remember things. But of course, if we give you too much of this stuff, then you start having seizures, and that's not good. It doesn't just work on the brain. It works on acetylcholine.
I got a question.
Yeah.
This might be a dumb question, but I gotta know. People with TBI,
Right.
are they susceptible to having Alzheimer's?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But we have just discovered something. If you take a high dosage of zinc and vitamin C, it repairs the neurons. This is something we just discovered a couple of years ago. So how much is it? Wait a minute. All right, I don't want to get it backwards. It's 50 and 30, or 530. I think it's 500 milligrams of vitamin C and 30 milligrams of zinc. So check your medication and see how much, they may be giving it to you already.
I don't think anything.
Oh, you're not taking anything?
No.
These are both supplements. These are zinc.
I take a one-a-day vitamin.
Check your one-a-day vitamin, see how much vitamin C is in there. If it's less than 500 milligrams, then you might use a vitamin C supplement. When I read about this, I was thinking, yeah, Scott would probably like to know about this, so I looked it up online to find out how expensive is this stuff. And it turns out, you can get it for $5 a bottle.
You can get it anywhere, huh?
Yeah, you can get it anywhere, and people take it for colds. Well, they take vitamin C for colds in the wintertime. So it wouldn't be, it's not gonna hurt anything. You can't overdose on zinc or vitamin C. Well, you can on vitamin C, but that's a mega dose that you would be taking. And this amount is not an excessive amount. So check your one-a-day vitamin and see how much vitamin C and zinc is in there. I checked mine. Of course, mine is for old farts. And I had a fairly average dosage of both of those. So if I had a TBI, I'd be taking the right amount of zinc.
When I was in inpatient
Right.
at the VA, they had me take the orange vitamin, but it was vitamin K.
Okay.
For some reason, they had me take that. I don't know what the heck vitamin K is.
Vitamin K is the vitamin that allows your blood to clot. So it promotes clotting. So the reason they were giving you vitamin K may have been because of they were trying to make sure that the wound was healing proper, or it was not bleeding anyway.
Yeah, they said that was out, but it said my blood didn't clot like it should.
Right.
So but they were afraid I was anemic or whatever you call
Oh, okay. They thought you had a bleeding problem. And that, of course, that word is, I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But, yeah, that's why they gave you the vitamin K, to make sure that you weren't bleeding into your brain. Slow down the bleeding. That's what vitamin K does.
There's problems.
Well, look into the zinc and the vitamin C thing.
Okay.
What they're saying is that it actually not only repairs, but it also regenerates. And it's just these two supplements, and that's it. It works with people with TBI. They're not really talking about combat, they weren't looking at combat veterans. What they were looking at were people that had been in automobile accidents and things like that. That's the same
Well,
difference.
mine was.
Yeah, one head's the same as the other, I guess. So we're taking physostigmine or Cognex, and it increases the amount of acetylcholine in your brain by blocking acetylcholinesterase, and it improves your memory, as much fun as that is. Opiates are analgesics. Analgesic means painkillers. Opiate receptors are found in the limbic and the hypothalamic areas of the brain, as well as in the gray matter of the brainstem. Synthetic opiates, such as Demerol, can be injected directly into the spinal cord to cause pain blockage. Usually, opiates just work in the spinal column. That's where most of it takes place. It doesn't get into your brain portion of the more advanced areas of your brain, and that's where it blocks the pain if it works. Endorphins are endogenous opiates, and of course we discovered the opiates first, and then we realized that there were natural endorphins. There were natural painkillers in our brains, and these we called endorphins. Once upon a time, we thought that there was just one kind of pain blockage neurotransmitters in our brain, just endorphins. Then we discovered there's two more kinds. And the reason we discovered there's two more kinds is because opiates work on endorphins. But then we had individuals who were not sensitive to opiates or opioids, and they still were able to block pain in their own brains or in their own systems. So despite the fact that opiates didn't work, they still controlled their pain. Like me, yeah, I don't have any problem with it. Now, if I injure myself, I'm in I hurt my knee in a softball game, I can sit down for a couple minutes and the pain will go away, and then I'm able to go out and play again. Just like if opiates worked on me. So they discovered two more kinds of painkillers, enkephalins and dynorphins, and it's a totally different chemical structure, but they block pain as well. So we not only have endorphins, we also have dynorphins and enkephalins that block pain. But this all had to do with opiates. We discovered endorphins, we discovered these endogenous painkillers, these endogenous analgesics in our system because of opiates. Endorphins are released with physical activity or select physical manipulation, such as massage, bathing, or breastfeeding. Now the funny thing is, I have had massages and people told me, oh, this is almost orgasmic, and they're rubbing on me and I'm going, I ain't feeling nothing. I'm not getting anything out of this. It's usually a back rub. But what happens normally is it releases endorphins. Women like to take baths. They're more sensitive to this stuff than males tend to be. So if a woman takes a nice warm bath, it releases the endorphins and it relaxes her. Takes away all of her pain, takes away all of her worries, just like opiates would if she shot up with heroin. Massages, my wife can go get a massage and, you know, she's like goofy for the next 24 to 36 hours. I mean, it's really kind of strange. It's like somebody injected her with something. But me, if I get a massage, it doesn't do anything to me. Why? Well, it releases endorphins is what it releases. And I may not have endorphins in my system, and that's why opiates don't work. I don't know. But I don't have any problem with pain. I can control my own pain. Endorphins tend to not only block pain, but they energize as well. And this is, of course, one of the reasons that people go and get massages, because of the endorphins. Marijuana is the most widely used legal and illegal drug in the United States. I was reading, I was on a website last night. I was watching the ball game between the Giants and the Pirates. And there was an advertisement off to the side. It was the guy that just retired from the Patriots, Gronkowski. He's pushing a CBD oil. CBD oil is marijuana. Has a lot of different chemicals in it. One of them is THC that makes you stoned. The other one is CBD, and CBD takes away pain. It does a lot of different things, but it's not a hallucinogen like THC is. But he's pushing this new drug that has CBD oil in it. Gronkowski, the guy that used to play tight end for the New England Patriots, he retired last year. The main ingredient of marijuana, of course, is tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. The human brain actually maintains receptor sites that turn out to be cannabinoid receptors. And for this reason, everybody used to say, dude, you know, it's natural because we have receptor sites for marijuana in our brains, and we don't know what these receptor sites do except, you know, make you high, man. So they were thinking that it was a natural drug. The humans evolved smoking pot, you know, that kind of thing. For a long time, no endogenous ligands could be discovered that shared the cannabinoid receptors. But now we have discovered anandamide, which triggers memory and hunger. Okay, so anandamide works by, it allows you to remember, it improves your short-term memory, but it also tells you when you're hungry. So now that answers lots and lots of questions. So if the anandamide receptor site is being taken up by THC, by marijuana, if it's being taken up by that, it really messes up your short-term memory, and it gives you the munchies. Now we understand. Now it makes sense. We didn't even know what anandamide was back in the 80s. And of course all these hippies and stoners were all going, dude, it's all natural. We've got this spatial receptor site in our brains, you know, for marijuana. And of course it wasn't true at all. It was the anandamide receptor site, and anandamide, of course, helps your short-term memory, and it tells you when you're hungry. So because the marijuana inhabits the anandamide receptor site, it messes up your short-term memory, and it gives you the munchies, as bizarre as it may seem. THC receptors are found in the hippocampus, the cerebellum, the substantia nigra, and the cerebral cortex. And this tells you why when people are stoned that they have problems moving, they don't move very well, and they don't think very well. And they can't remember crap. They can't remember anything. And it also blocks the substantia, or it's in the substantia nigra. Substantia nigra has to do with dopamine. That's where your dopamine is produced. Now, one of the things that we know about marijuana is that if people are susceptible to schizophrenia, that marijuana may kick you into schizophrenia. That you may develop schizophrenia earlier than you would otherwise. And this has to do with the substantia nigra. Okay. Some people, the first time they smoke pot, they go psychotic. And now they have schizophrenia. Now they've developed schizophrenia. If somebody is susceptible to schizophrenia and they smoke pot, they may have a psychotic episode. It may be all over with. Now, that doesn't mean that the schizophrenia isn't treatable, but they will have a psychotic episode because of the schizophrenia. They will have a psychotic episode because that's what the marijuana has triggered the schizophrenia. The receptors reduce sensitivity to pain, it reduces sensitivity to temperature, it reduces movement, it reduces response to external stimuli. In other words, you kind of go inside yourself and of course it reduces your sensitivity to pain. That's what the CBD oil does. It reduces the sensitivity to temperature. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody who's smoking pot, but you never know. You just never know.
Yeah, they don't really do anything.
They don't want to do anything, exactly. It reduces their movement. It reduces their ability to think. As crazy as this is, let's take something that makes us stupid. This will be perfect. Alcohol works on the nervous system in two ways. Initially, it acts as a stimulant. So that first drink you took, that first hit of cognac you took, it was actually a stimulant, and it made you feel energized, and you were ready to go. But the more you drank, the less functional you became. At that stage, you became a depressant, and it took away lots of different memories, and that's one of the reasons why you're drinking so much. You were trying to forget, and it helped you forget. It helped you forget because when you're drinking, you can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. I mean, this is perfect.
But I get so bad to where I wouldn't even watch TV. I just sit on my bed in the barracks.
That's not good at all. You're a lonely drinker, and that's the worst kind because they can drink to excess and they don't even realize how much they're drinking.
And then there was another sergeant. He went green to gold. He became a butter bar.
Yeah.
But he goes, "Hey man, come on!" He freaking broke my bottle.
Oh
He goes,
wow.
"Come on, we're getting out of here."
Sure.
So he took me bowling and stuff, you know. He goes,
Anything.
"Get out of this funk, man."
Yeah, exactly. That's what you needed to do. And it was putting you in more of a funk because it's a depressant.
Mm-hmm.
So despite the fact you're combating negative feelings, it actually gave you more negative feelings. Yeah. As ugly as that is. Prolonged use of alcohol can damage your nerve cells, unfortunately, and these are nerve cells in your brain that we're talking about. Areas affected by long-term use include your Purkinje cells and your cerebellum. These are the cells that control your movements. So if we've ever been around extensive alcoholics, a lot of times they shuffle when they walk. They can't walk very well anymore. They don't have the same ability to move that they did before. If we watch comedians who are drunks, a lot of times they became shuffling comedians. Red Fox is a good example. Red Fox said that he realized he was an alcoholic when he drank a fifth of whiskey and he didn't feel drunk. He said he knew at that moment that he was an alcoholic. He didn't realize it before then, but it had already affected him. His movements were limited after that.
It got bad to where, like, I would drink after PT in the shower.
Oh, gee, Christmas.
It got bad.
I'll show you what a drunk looks like in just a second. I'll show you what their brain looks like. Superior frontal cortex, this is the thinking portion of your brain. So it slows down your movement, it changes your ability to move. It changes your ability to think, to concentrate. And your hippocampal pyramidal cells, this is the part that allows you to remember things. So your memory is impaired. And this is what it looks like. This is what somebody looks like when they're not when they're not a drinker. This is what it looks like when you are a drinker. It slows everything down.
I don't know, but I would drink, go to shoot house, I can function, no problem. I clear buildings, I can shoot. You know?
Yes, sure. You were still functional with things that were routine.
That's true.
Yeah.
As an infantryman, everything's
It's almost like a habit. I mean, you can
Yeah.
still do habitual things. You can still do the same things that as long as nothing changes. If something changes, then you don't understand what's going on. You don't recognize it. But as long as everything is the same over and over again, then you're okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, see, this is a thinking man, and this is a man on alcohol. Alcohol activates the GABA receptors, increasing postsynaptic inhibition. Euphoria when drinking may be stimulated by dopamine activation. So it makes you feel euphoric to some extent because of the increase of dopamine. Remember, it affects your substantia nigra, and that's where dopamine comes from. It activates excitatory glutamate receptors while it reduces the effects of glutamate and interferes with second messenger systems inside the neurons. Glutamate, of course, is inhibitory. So people who are drinkers, and if they drink for an extended length of time, they become very agitated. Things irritate them. And then they use that irritation as an excuse to go out and drink some more. Because they can't handle the kids making too much noise. That kind of thing. They can't handle the arguments their wife keeps trying to tell them to stop drinking. And they can't handle that, so they go out and drink some more. But that's mainly because these inhibitory neurons, this inhibitory neurotransmitter in your brain is being depleted, the GABA. So they become very easily irritated. And of course, then they use that as an excuse to go out and get drunk somewhere. Anxiolytics, anxiety loosening, are medications that treat anxiety, anxiolytics. About 8% of American adults suffer from anxiety at any one given time in the United States. That's almost 1 out of every 10 people has anxiety at this moment. So if we fill this room up with 20 people, 2 people will be suffering from anxiety in here. The major anxiolytics now in use are benzodiazepines, with the most popular being alprazolam, which is another name for Xanax, and diazepam, which is the chemical name for Valium. Diazepam and alprazolam, Xanax and Valium. Benzodiazepines work by enhancing GABA receptors, increasing the effects, and that's what it does. It increases the GABA level and making everything functional. As much fun as that is. Okay, there we go. And GABA, of course, is inhibitory. It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it inhibits the anxiety-producing portion of your brain. Slows it down, slows all this stuff down. Benzodiazepines mirror the reduction of stress produced by allopregnanolone, a hormone derived from progesterone. Progesterone, of course, is, both males and females have progesterone. Females have a lot more of it, progesterone. So females tend to be more susceptible to anxiety than males are because they have more progesterone in their system. Allopregnanolone binds to GABA receptors, increasing the effectiveness of GABA. GABA in turn inhibits the release of corticotropin-releasing hormones, which triggers the stress response, reducing your stress, and that's how it works. Alcohol increases the level of allopregnanolone in the brain, creating the calming effect of alcohol, and that's why people drink. They drink because they have anxieties. They drink because they're depressed. And if we increase your GABA level, you don't feel it so much. And now that portion of your brain isn't functioning as well as it was before. So you could use alcohol to control your anxiety, and a lot of people do. So the reality is that we have a lot more people with anxiety in the United States than are diagnosed, because these people are self-medicating. They're using alcohol to control their anxiety. But they become less functional. Stimulants are drugs that lead the brain to states of more excitation than inhibition. They have an alerting and activating effect. Some act by stimulating excitatory neurotransmitters. Some act by blocking normal inhibitory processes, as caffeine does with adenosine. Adenosine is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, slows everything down. If you drink caffeine, which you just got in your Diet Coke, if you drink caffeine, you're more awake than you were before, because adenosine doesn't really put you to sleep, but it slows things down.
I don't know, I could drink a Monster and still go to sleep.
Exactly. So some people are not sensitive to caffeine.
It's just weird, I would drink so much caffeine because it helped with my headaches because
Right.
of my TBI. So I think I've drinking so much caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes away the headache, but that's all it does.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah, you gotta be careful what medications or what, anything you're putting in your system, because potentially you could be exacerbating all your symptoms. With caffeine, with alcohol, with, just about anything. But hopefully the vitamin C and zinc will help.
Yeah, I'm not looking
Yeah, and it doesn't take that much. You may not need eat any more supplements than what you're taking now. And then the good news is that it's repairing your brain. So if you've been taking a therapeutic amount of zinc and vitamin C with your multivitamin, then that may be one of the reasons why 2 years ago, when I first met you, you were not nearly as functional as you are today. Because you've been doing all these things that actually help you that you didn't know about.
at it.
So you're repairing your brain. And this will continue to repair the neurons, as much fun as that is. So, and the human brain wants to be fixed. The human brain wants to be normal. So if you're taking in something like alcohol, if you're drinking alcohol, then your brain tries to repair itself from all the damage that you're doing with the alcohol. Okay. If you're depressed, then your brain doesn't want to be depressed. Your brain wants to feel normal. So it will pump out more serotonin or norepinephrine to make you feel better. It does that naturally, and that's one of the reasons why you can't just stay depressed all the time. You're not in the toilet all the time, because your brain naturally is trying to repair itself. It's trying to be normal. It wants to be normal. It wants everything to be Hojo. It wants everything to be balanced. So it's seeking that all the time. And of course you're self-medicating, potentially you're self-medicating, trying to make yourself feel more normal, but your brain is doing this anyway. And sometimes, of course, you're taking in a substance that will reduce the effects of your own body trying to repair itself.
Yeah, I haven't touched beer, nothing in like
Sure.
almost 3 months.
Oh, wow.
So I just don't do it.
You don't do it anymore. And it may be because things are getting better. Things are repairing themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's the way your brain works. That's the way the human body is. If we just leave it alone, if we mess it up and then we just leave it alone, eventually it'll get back to a point of where it's repaired. Because we want to be normal. Most of us do anyway. Well, some of us do. But we do strange things like put nicotine in our systems. Nicotine, until the advent of milder cigarettes, nicotine was not widely used. It was too strong, it was too harsh, people couldn't stand it.
I smoke time to time,
Sure,
like when I go to the casino,
sure.
you know. But it was funny, I never dipped, you know, until I became a drill sergeant.
Right.
Because I'm here before 4 o'clock, you're doing a rock march, you need
Right.
something to freaking, you can't exactly carry a cup of coffee,
Sure.
so
Right.
that stuff will wake you
Well, that worked on you. A 5-hour energy drink, of course that wouldn't work on you because it's
No.
caffeine. Yeah, but the nicotine actually.
It might for maybe like 30 mics, and then like,
Right.
you know.
Well, we'll find out why the nicotine worked in just a second. Because of the mildness of cigarette smoke, it is more readily drawn into the lungs, and thus it's able to cover a large surface of the lungs. Once upon a time, people smoked pipes and they smoked cigars, but if you've ever tried to smoke a pipe or a cigar, you can't draw it down into your lungs. It's too harsh. The tobacco is too harsh. It
You're supposed
hurts.
to just taste it. Like I don't mind a nice cigar. 10%.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
But you don't really take it down into your lungs.
No, you freaking choke.
Yeah, exactly.
You're supposed to taste it.
Yeah, exactly. You keep it in your mouth. So it causes all kinds of interesting problems inside your mouth, but it doesn't get down into your lungs. But if you smoke cigarettes, of course, you can draw that stuff down into your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch old movies or old television shows, a lot of times people would take a puff of a cigarette, they'd draw it down into their lungs and they'd blow it out their noses. You know, they're really taking this stuff into their system. And that's one of the reasons why they could do it, was because it was a milder tobacco. As weird as that sounds. The harsher the forms of tobacco tend to only come in contact with the mucous membranes in your mouth, but it doesn't come in contact with your lungs. The problem was, of course, we were given cigarettes in our C rations.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were given cigarettes in our C.
Lucky Strikes.
Exactly, Lucky Strikes. And Chesterfields. We had Chesterfields too.
Mm-hmm.
But they stopped doing that. You guys weren't getting cigarettes. They were
For some reason, they would still put matches in there.
matches.
It
But
would
no
be
cigarette.
American matches, little nasty gum,
Yeah,
and of course the food.
yeah,
That's it.
the food, which was nasty as well. But during World War II, of course, they didn't have filtered cigarette. They didn't give out filtered cigarettes. They were unfiltered cigarettes. So they hooked a lot of people, a lot of military people who smoked because they were given cigarettes in their C rations, along with chocolates. What you need?
Disturb you guys. Burritos.
Oh, no thanks.
Okay.
Nicotine activates the acetylcholine receptors known as nicotinic receptors. These receptors are found primarily in the neuromuscular junctions and in the neurons of the autonomic ganglia. Nicotine works on the body by increasing the heart rate, by stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, and by stimulating the release of epinephrine. And there you go. That's why when you started using tobacco, you started taking nicotine pills. Is that what you were taking? The nicotine pills?
No, I did.
Oh, did?
Cocaine.
Oh, that's a constant. Yeah, so you're stimulating your heart rate would go up. You would increase the amount of epinephrine in your system, and of course your sympathetic nervous system. So you're all ready to go.
I have to be.
But of course you crashed later on.
No, I actually be pretty decent, you know,
All day?
till about 2300.
And then you crashed.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
by that time the day was over anyway.
So as long as you were functional. Cocaine is synthesized from the coca shrub. In their natural and more diluted forms, the coca leaves do not produce either an extreme reaction or the possibility of addiction. Increased endurance, lower sensitivity to hunger, and a vague sense of well-being. This is what the coca gives you. Synthesized into concentrated powder or crystals, the effect is much stronger. So if you snort cocaine, of course, these are the indigenous peoples of the Andes used to chew coca leaves so that they could function all day long. It increased their endurance, it lowered their sensitivity, made them less sensitive to altitude. So they were able to go up into the high areas of the Andes. But of course, then Europeans got a hold of this stuff, and they decided that they were going to make a powder out of it, And of course, eventually, they couldn't sell the powder anymore. It was hard to smuggle this stuff in, so they started making the crystals. Crack, that's the crack, the crystals. As a powder, it is snorted through the nostrils for rapid lung diffusion and thus rapid entry into the bloodstream. Crack, when smoked, enters the bloodstream even faster, of course. And it's almost immediately addictive. Crack cocaine is almost immediately addictive. You smoke it one time and you're hung up on it. Cocaine blocks norepinephrine receptors and allows more of the transmitter to circulate in the brain. Because cocaine is a vasoconstrictor, it increases the blood pressure and it induces greater heart activity. Now this is okay as long as you don't have any flaws in your heart. If you have a flaw in your heart, you snort cocaine and you die. If you've got a problem with your heart. Athletic people sometimes will snort cocaine and die. There was a basketball player by the name of Lynn Bias. Snorted cocaine one time. He was a first-round draft pick for the Celtics back in the 70s. Snorted cocaine one time and it killed him because he had a heart problem that was exacerbated by snorting cocaine. He could run up and down the court all day long. Didn't bother him. But he snorted cocaine one time and it killed him. It also can cause a stroke. Cause you to have a stroke. And this is not a good thing, of course. This is a normal person, as you can see, they have brain activity. The problem with cocaine is it slows everything down when you're not snorting cocaine. This is a cocaine user. They haven't used for 10 days. This is one that hasn't used cocaine for 100 days. As you can see, the brain activity is increasing, but it ain't there yet. It's not here yet. So it makes you...
That's why people always, they want to keep it going.
It makes you stupid. It makes you stupid, okay? It slows your brain down because it accelerates your brain when you're on cocaine, and your brain gets used to being on cocaine. So when you're not on cocaine, you feel you're not as smart as you were before. Your brain activity isn't as it's hardly anything at all, as you can see from these two. Oddly, cocaine leads to less activity in the frontal lobe, the seat of intellectual functioning, so it slows down your thinking processes. Even after stopping the use of cocaine, the brain does not return to normal metabolism for several months. So it slowed all this process down. People that are on crystal meth, they say they have meth head, which means they can't think about anything. They're stupid. They're not as bright as they were before. It takes 18 months for your brain to recover completely. So if you've got somebody with 150 IQ, which is really high, and they start snorting cocaine, they are reducing their brain activity by markedly, to the extent that it may be 110 IQ. And it won't recover for 18 months. They won't get back to 150 IQ for 18 months.
It's a long time.
That is a long time. I had a student that was a meth head, and she was brilliant. She was part Aleut and part Grovan. She was part Eskimo and part Northern Plains Indian. And she was brilliant. And I'll tell you, I could tell when she was snorting cocaine, because she got dumb as dirt. And she became sensitive to light. She was really sensitive to light. So if I created a PowerPoint, she couldn't look at this PowerPoint. She couldn't see it. She couldn't look at it because it's too bright. The background is too bright. I'd have to put a dark background behind it so that she could read it. Otherwise, it blinded her. She couldn't sit in this room right now.
It's too bright for him?
It's too bright. I'd have to turn the lights off.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. Okay, so what are we doing? Even after stopping the cocaine, of course, it takes several months for the metabolism to go back to normal. Children exposed to cocaine in the womb may suffer from irreversible harm to the development of the brain. The brain develops, and if you put strange chemicals in there like alcohol or cocaine or caffeine or marijuana, you're changing the structure of the brain. The brain is developing in a different manner. And sometimes this is not a positive thing. Cocaine seems to interfere with the ability to focus attention and with some intellectual functioning. So these individuals have what looks like ADHD, but it's cocaine-induced ADHD. So this child will suffer from ADHD for the rest of their lives because they've restructured the brain with this cocaine, with this chemical. Amphetamines and methamphetamines have similar structure to that of the catecholamine transmitters, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. The amphetamines cause the release of these transmitters from the synaptic vesicles without nerve impulses. After the release of the transmitters, the amphetamine enhances the activity by blocking the reuptake of endogenous transmitters, competing with the endogenous transmitters for the enzyme that inactivates them. And this is the reason that amphetamines work. And this is one of the reasons why if you take amphetamines, that you stay high for an extended length of time. It blocks the breakdown of these endogenous neurotransmitters, the epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're on top of the world because that's what norepinephrine does. It's a natural neurotransmitter that makes you feel good. Thus, the amphetamines prolong the presence of the endogenous transmitters in the synaptic cleft. That's what I just said. The short-term effect of amphetamines, it heightens your alertness to the state of euphoria. It wards off boredom. It promotes sustained effort with little rest and lowered fatigue. So you can do lots of stuff. We used to give our soldiers this during World War II. The Germans used to give their soldiers this during World War II. It would make them able to fight for an extended length of time, for 24, 36 hours straight, without getting tired at all. They were like supermen. You had to kill them in order to stop them. However, quality of the work is not enhanced. It increases motivation, but it does not increase your cognitive ability. So even though you feel like you're smarter, you're not really any smarter. You're not coming up with any good ideas. Amphetamines affect the autonomic nervous system by producing high blood pressure. It gives you tremors, and you can tell if somebody's a meth head or somebody's a speed freak. You can tell because they have tremors. Usually it's in their hands. They just can't control their hands, and they got a permanent shake. It's like they have Parkinson's disease. But that's the dopamine. It's the dopamine. Dizziness sometimes, sweating, and it stinks. I swear. No one's.
It's all chemical.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Nobody
It smells
stinks.
like burnt rubber.
Exactly. Burnt rubber.
My cousin used to make it.
It's nasty.
Never did it, but he just wanted money.
Burnt rubber. Exactly. Rapid breathing and of course nausea makes you feel nauseous. The long-term effect of tolerance, you build up a tolerance to the amphetamine, and you need to increase the drug. Eventually, you're increasing the drug. This may be due to excitotoxicity. In other words, you're destroying your brain cells, your neurons in your brain, because you're stimulating them too much. They can only take so much stimulation. Sleeplessness, of course, now you can't sleep. Now your sleep pattern has been disrupted. Severe weight loss because you're not eating anything, you don't feel hungry. General deterioration of mental and physical condition. And of course, this is what we see in people that use amphetamines over a long period of time. This is what we see in meth heads. This is what we see in speed freaks. In the old days, of course, methamphetamines weren't all that popular, but we did have speed freaks. This is back in the 70s and 80s. Lots of speed freaks. They were using amphetamines as a diet pill. So there were a lot of people taking, especially females, they were taking a lot of amphetamines. And of course, then they'd sell them to guys, and guys would start using them, and then they couldn't stop, it's that kind of a situation. Extreme use may lead to symptoms similar to those of paranoid schizophrenia. They don't trust anybody. Compulsive agitated behavior, irrational suspiciousness. Observation of those who use chronically shows symptoms of brain damage. So we do know there is brain damage. We know it. We see it. We can find it. Hallucinogens alter sensory perception. The hallucinogens include LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin. Mescaline, of course, is peyote. That's a chemical structure in peyote. The hallucinations are often visual in effect. LSD, lysergic acid diethylmide, creates its amazing effects by acting on select serotonin receptors, but researchers are not sure exactly why. We don't know why LSD works. The structure of LSD resembles that of serotonin, and for that reason, you have all these fantastic reactions to LSD. Phencyclidine, or PCP, was developed as an analgesic and an anesthesia, but it created such agitated side effects that its use on humans was stopped. We used it in Vietnam, along with ketamine. But what we discovered was we were really screwing these guys up. You're okay, don't worry about it. There's only a couple more minutes anyway. Resurfacing as a veterinary anesthetic, its effects became known as on the street, and abuse of the drug followed the PCP. PCP can become toxic fairly quickly with low doses, causing combativeness and catatonia. It's weird. It's like their brain's not working, but their body is. So you'll see these guys, and it's almost like they're zombies walking around. The problem is they feel no pain, so you can't knock them down. You have to kill them in order to stop them.
Zombies.
Yeah. PCP. Angel dust. Angel dust. People put this stuff in their marijuana. They put it in their doobie to make for a cigarette. Or blunt. See, I know all the words. And then, of course, now they've got PCP in their system as well as THC. This is what it looks like. It's really quite attractive. PCP can be found in a powdered form, dissolved in water as a pill, or as a dark gummy substance. And this is the dark gummy substance. It is usually smoked by placing it on marijuana or another leafy substance, and then it's smoked. And now we got a zombie. And the only way to stop this guy, and it kind of dislodges the thinking portion of your brain. And because it does that, you can't reason you can't even talk to these people. They're not hearing what you're saying. It's the weirdest stuff in the world. We saw this stuff out in LA a lot.
Yeah, I was watching Cops, and one of my friend's uncles was on there. He's from El Monte Flores, the neighborhood up there.
Right.
And he hit a police dog straight on. He was just so jacked up on,
Did everybody die?
I don't know, they tased him like 8 times, and still, he just kept on going.
You can't stop them. They're zombies.
Finally, they got a big bag shotgun.
Oh, really?
And they hit him twice, and I got him in the chest.